What you're feeling right now has a name. And that name is not failure. It's the wall before the breakthrough. There's a very specific point in the transformation journey. A point almost no one maps accurately because those who made it to the other side forget what it felt like to be there. And those who are still in it don't realize it's the closest they've ever been to real progress. This point has a very distinct texture. The feeling that you did everything right, worked with everything you had, got further than ever before, and then stopped. Not stepped back, stopped. The stagnation you're feeling isn't proof that it won't work. It's proof that you got close enough for the system to start resisting. You've gone through a very specific kind of journey. Not the journey of someone who never started. That was never yours. You started. You changed real patterns. You developed real awareness of who you were and who you want to be. You did genuine work, internal, consistent, sometimes costly. And you reached a point where the changes you expected should already have fully materialized. But there's still a gap between who you are now and what you know is available to you. That gap wears you down in a very specific way. Not with despair, but with a quiet, persistent frustration that's harder to handle than open despair, because you know too much to pretend you didn't get close. And you didn't get far enough to rest in what you've achieved. Quantum physics describes a phenomenon called quantum tunneling. Particles that encounter an energy barrier they shouldn't be able to cross can, under certain conditions, appear on the other side without passing through it in the conventional sense. Not because the barrier disappeared, but because there's a mechanism operating below classical logic. The wall you're facing now works in a similar way. It seems impossible because you're trying to get through it using the same methods that got you this far. And the methods that got you this far are not the ones that break the final wall. You're not going to get more techniques here. You're going to recognize what the final wall actually is. And when you truly recognize it, not as a concept, but as something that drops into your body with sudden clarity, the way through it becomes obvious in a way effort could never produce. This is the exact moment, not before, because the impatience of the early stages doesn't allow you to see what advanced stagnation reveals. Not after, because the wall demands to be crossed now, it won't wait any longer. Leaving before the end would be the 10th time, or the 20th, that you got this far and turned back without what you came for. Less than 1% of people who reach the final wall of transformation understand what it really is before giving up or continuing to try the wrong way for more years than they should. You're in that 1%. And there's a paradox at the center of all of this that will fully reveal itself only at the end. The wall that's blocking you isn't in front of you. It's inside you, and not where you think it is. But before understanding what's giving way, we need to look at what has always been holding you back. The most common behavior of someone who has reached the final wall is to intensify what worked before. You apply more of the tools that brought results in earlier stages, more awareness, more inner work, more practice, more consistency. And the wall doesn't give, because the final wall isn't made of the same material as previous blocks. The blocks in earlier stages were based on lack. Lack of awareness, lack of tools, lack of commitment. Those gave way when you brought in what was missing. The final wall isn't about lack, it's about excess. It's the excess of control over the transformation process. You spent so long learning to be the conscious agent of your transformation, identifying patterns, working through blocks, cultivating states, directing your energy with intention, that you reached a point where the control that got you here is now preventing what needs to happen next. Because the next level isn't conquered, it's received. And receiving requires a kind of openness that constant control makes impossible. The counterintuitive shift is this. You don't cross the final wall with more effort. You cross it with a form of surrender that only makes sense when you've come far enough to trust the process without needing to manage it. The difference between consciously controlling the process and trusting surrender to the process is the difference between swimming against the current and recognizing the exact moment to stop swimming and let the current carry you. The current was going in the right direction the whole time. The effort was what kept you from getting there faster. Decoherence, the process by which the quantum field collapses from possibility into reality, is more sensitive to the observer's state of openness than to the intensity of their intention. You can have maximum intention and a closed state, and nothing collapses into reality. Or you can have quiet intention and a completely open state, and the field responds with surprising speed. Think of fertile soil. You prepared the ground, planted the seed, watered it consistently, and now the soil needs to do what only it knows how to do, in its own time, by its own logic, without you digging it up every morning to check if the root is growing. Constant checking doesn't speed up germination. It destroys what was being built in the dark. You prepared the soil. It's time to stop digging. But here's the part most people stop listening to. And it's exactly what changes everything. The final wall of transformation has a specific structure that explains why it resists everything that worked before. The blocks in earlier stages were based on beliefs and patterns that could be identified, worked on, and replaced through conscious effort. The final wall is not a block in the conventional sense. It's a transition zone, the point where the old identity and the new identity still coexist, where the brain hasn't fully consolidated the new self-pattern yet, where any additional pressure activates the protection system of the old identity, instead of accelerating the installation of the new one. Neuroplasticity documents something precise about this. The transition period between two stable states of identity is the most sensitive to interruption. Not because you're going back to the starting point, but because the nervous system, during the consolidation of new patterns, becomes temporarily more reactive to what seems to threaten the process. And paradoxically, the conscious effort to accelerate consolidation is interpreted by the nervous system as a threat to the process, and activates exactly the resistance you're trying to overcome. This explains the specific texture of the final wall. The more you push, the more solid it seems. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because the mechanism of final consolidation requires a condition that pushing makes impossible, the condition of allowing the process to complete without interference. Think of fog dissipating at dawn. You can't push the fog to make it disappear faster. It dissipates when conditions are right, when the sun's heat increases enough, when the air moves in the right way. Any attempt to remove it by force doesn't dissipate it. It creates turbulence that keeps it around longer than it should be. The fog between you and the next level won't disappear with more effort. It will dissipate when you create the conditions that allow it to happen naturally. Take a deep breath now. Relax your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Notice in this moment any tension in your body related to the transformation process, the urgency to get there, the impatience with the pace, the feeling that you should be further along than you are. Just observe it. Don't try to fix it. Just observe. That tension is exactly what we're talking about. It's the effort that's making the fog denser than it needs to be. The practical consequence is direct. The condition that dissolves the final wall is not a new technique or additional effort. It's a quality of presence that you probably never fully allowed because you were always oriented toward the next step. But there's an obstacle to accessing this quality of presence that isn't obvious because it looks like a virtue, not a blockage. And when you truly understand this, you realize there's an obstacle no one talks about. What's blocking you isn't what you think it is. The obstacle isn't impatience. You've already worked through impatience. It's attachment to the transformation narrative. You built a story about who you're becoming. A narrative with direction, progress, a destination that justifies the cost of everything you've done so far. And that narrative, which was necessary to sustain effort in earlier stages, has become the exact blockage of the final wall. Because the transformation narrative is still managed by the self that is transforming. And the self that is transforming, by definition, is not yet the self that has arrived. And as long as you maintain the narrative of, I am in the process of becoming, with all the vigilance that requires, with all the attention to progress that it creates, you remain in the role of someone who hasn't arrived yet. The fatal mistake at the final wall is not a lack of work. It's maintaining the role of someone in transformation when the field is already ready for you to inhabit the role of someone who has arrived. The difference between an identity in transformation and an arrived identity is exactly this. The first is always oriented toward the future it will become. The second fully inhabits the present it already is. And the quantum field collapses reality around who you are now, not who you are becoming. As long as you are someone in process, the field will keep reflecting process, not arrival. Your transformation narrative isn't the enemy. It's the last guardian before the breakthrough, and one of the most sophisticated you've encountered because it's made of the same material you used to build all your progress so far. It's not obvious resistance. It's commitment to a role that served you well and now needs to be let go. How do you let go of the transformation narrative without abandoning what you've achieved? That remains open. Because the answer isn't what you probably expect. If you've made it this far, you're already closer to the other side than at any other moment. The guardian you're facing now is the closest to arrival you've ever been. So how do you cross this final guardian? Here's what changes everything. The solution isn't to drop the transformation narrative through willpower. It's to shift roles so completely that the narrative loses its function. The role of someone in transformation has a specific function. It sustains effort, justifies the cost, maintains direction during moments of doubt. But when you reach the final wall, the effort that role sustained is exactly what the wall no longer accepts. The final wall only gives way to those who stop trying to cross it as someone in process and start inhabiting it as someone who has already arrived. The practical instruction is this. Today, choose a 2-hour period in which you will act, not as someone becoming who you want to be, but as someone who already is. Not, I'm working to become more confident. Just act with confidence, without the framework of practice. Not, I'm learning to be more present. Just be present, without the context of being in a process. It's a shift in role, not in behavior. The behavior may be identical. What changes is who is doing it, and the field detects the difference between these two states with a precision that no conscious intention can fake. Before continuing, pause here. Feel, for a moment, what it would be like to already be on the other side of the wall right now. Not 6 months from now, not when everything is resolved. Now, without the conditions imposed by the in-transformation role. Just the quality of someone who has arrived. Don't analyze whether it's real. Just let that feeling exist for a few seconds. What you felt, even if slightly, even if briefly, is the state that dissolves the wall. The open loop from Block 4 closes here. Letting go of the transformation narrative doesn't mean abandoning what you've achieved. It means stopping using what you've achieved as justification for not having arrived yet. What you are now is enough for the next level. The field is just waiting for you to stop acting as if it isn't. This resolves the attachment to the role of being in process. But there's a deeper layer that determines whether this role shift will consolidate as permanent or become just another temporary shift before the gravity of the old role takes over again. This layer is where your individual experience meets the confirmation that only comes when you realize you're not doing this alone. Comment now. I have already arrived. Not as an affirmation you're trying to convince yourself of. As a declaration of the role you choose to inhabit from this moment on. The field registers the role, not the intention to have the role. And this deeper layer? It's where everything you've learned either becomes permanent or disappears within days. You're not discovering something that only exists now. You are arriving, through your own specific and unrepeatable path, at the same recognition reached by some of the deepest minds who mapped human transformation, in completely different languages, with completely different audiences, with no connection between them other than the truth they were describing. The Zen masters of medieval Japan distinguished between two states that we roughly translate as seeking enlightenment and being enlightenment, and taught that the search, no matter how sincere and dedicated, contains within it the very assumption that prevents arrival. The assumption that enlightenment is ahead, not here. The most famous koan in the Zen tradition, "What is your original face before your parents were born?" has no intellectual answer precisely because it invites the practitioner to stop seeking and simply be what they are before any search. The final wall you are encountering is your personal koan. The psychologist Abraham Maslow, who mapped the hierarchy of human needs and later the concept of self-actualization, described something he called peak experiences, states in which a person completely stops orienting toward the future and inhabits the present with a wholeness that the logic of progressive transformation never produces. He documented that the greatest achievements of the people he studied did not come from additional effort at the end. They came from a state of letting go of effort that paradoxically released a capacity that effort itself was blocking. The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, written more than 2,500 years ago, in a culture with no connection to medieval Japan or 20th century American psychology, describes Wu Wei, action that emerges from non-action, effectiveness that only exists when effort stops. The sage acts without acting and everything is accomplished is not a statement of passivity. It is a precise description of the state you need now. Action that emerges from someone who has already arrived, not from someone still trying to arrive. And contemporary neuroscience, specifically studies on the flow state documented by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, confirms that peak performance states are not accompanied by maximum conscious effort. They are accompanied by a release of self-monitoring that unlocks capacities that constant monitoring suppresses. Flow, the state where everything moves without friction, is not achieved. It is what happens when you stop interfering with what was already available. Zen tradition, Abraham Maslow, Lao Tzu, flow, neuroscience, all describing the same structure. The final step of transformation is not another step. It is the stopping of the step, and the discovery that you were already where you needed to be. The unifying statement is this: the final wall does not yield to those who push against it. It yields to those who stop pushing and simply walk through, because they realize it was never solid for someone who has already arrived from within. Bringing this directly to you, every time you stayed at the wall and tried harder, more work, more awareness, more effort, you weren't proving that you lack what it takes. You were confirming that you were still in the wrong role. The role of someone arriving, not someone who has already arrived. The difference between transformation as an endless process and transformation as an arrival that has already happened is the difference between always being on your way and finally landing. You can keep flying indefinitely, or you can land now and discover that the destination was here all along. Like light that finally passes through the fog, not because the fog disappeared, but because the light stopped trying to pass through and simply was. You don't cross the final wall. You are the light that has already reached the other side. And when you embody this, not as an idea, but as identity, something changes that cannot be undone. You are no longer someone in the process of transformation. You are someone who recognized that the process has already done its job. And what remains is no longer transformation, but inhabitation. Inhabiting who you have become, completely. Without the asterisk of, I'm still getting there. You already are this, the moment you stop waiting for more evidence that you've arrived. You won't complete the transformation when the wall finally gives way. You won't reach the next level when circumstances confirm that you've changed enough. You have already arrived, the moment you stop inhabiting the role of someone who is still arriving and start inhabiting the role of someone who is here. We are those who choose to land instead of continuing to fly toward a destination that is already beneath our feet. Who choose to inhabit arrival instead of managing the process. Who know, not as a belief to be confirmed by what will happen later, but as a certainty that already exists now, that the final wall is not an obstacle. It is the last mirror before you recognize you've always been on the other side. Don't subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to this frequency of arrival. The frequency of someone who stopped becoming and started being. You who made it this far are no longer someone who was stuck. You are someone who recognized that the block wasn't in the wall ahead. It was in the role you were carrying, the role of someone who hadn't arrived yet, which produced exactly the reality of someone who hadn't arrived, with a consistency that seemed like objective evidence, but was subjective construction. The synthesis is paradoxical. Like every truth worth the cost of finding, you weren't far from progress. You were so close that the very proximity activated the system that prevented arrival. The final wall only exists for those who still believe they need to cross it. Comment the word arrival below, not as hope for what will come, but as a declaration of where you are choosing to stand now. You recognize the final wall and what dissolves it. But there is a layer beyond arrival. The layer where what you have become begins to express itself in the world in ways that the transformation process could never produce. In the next video, I'll show why most people who cross the final wall still live as if they were outside, and what specifically changes when arrival settles not only as an internal state, but as an expressed reality. The other side was always here,